This happened a couple of decades ago, but I'll never forget it. It happened when I was about 8 or 9 years old in the late 70s or early 80s, when most of the malls had an arcade inside. They were pretty dark for some reason. My mother had gotten a job working at the mall, and since it was summer, she insisted I go with her to the mall where I might find something to do instead of hanging out around the house, watching TV and eating Little Debbie's all day. Her skincare store was boring to me, so I wandered across the arcade and watched grown-ups playing skee-ball or whatever games were popular back then. I had no money of my own, but I soon realized the adults in the arcade were all too happy to give away their tickets to a little girl because they didn't really want to exchange them for a Chinese finger cuff or spider ring anyways. Within 45 minutes, I had collected tons of little tickets and was well on my way to building up the Magic 8 Ball. Woohoo! I'm walking around looking to see which games have no players but tickets sticking out of them, or looking to see where the adults are who might be willing to give me their tickets. But it was getting later and later in the day, and the customers were getting fewer and fewer. I'm now trying to decide if I should just go with the yo-yo with the tickets and be done with it, when all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I see a man, and he's standing in the back corner of the building. He smiles a big, friendly smile, and waves right at me. He's dressed in a solid white three-piece suit, which I thought was weird even for that area. He gestures with his hand that I should come over to him, where he was standing. I was a little confused since I didn't know him. I looked around the place to see if maybe he was waving at someone else. It was very dark in there. Perhaps he thought I was someone he knew. Or maybe he was the owner. Was I in trouble for taking all the unclaimed tickets? He was still smiling and looking nice enough, so I thought I'd be a good kid who listened and followed directions when grown-ups asked him to do something. So I headed straight over towards him. I figured he must have seen me hanging out around the arcade and possibly had some tickets I could have. Yes, the Magic 8 Ball was still a possibility. As I get closer and closer, I see there is a neon exit sign above his head, and he is standing just in front of the rear exit door of the arcade. This is not the door leading into the open mall, but the back door that would have been used to get into the parking lot. As I got within a few feet of where he was standing with his hand outstretched, I suddenly went from feeling calm and happy to completely and totally terrified. I have absolutely no idea why I would have been overcome with such a strong emotion. The man's facial expression hadn't changed, and he was still smiling. He looked like a sweet, overdressed grandpa. I turned on my Buster Brown sandals and dropped each and every one of those hard-earned tickets and ran as fast as I could through the arcade, out the front door, and back into the mall, back to my mom's store, where she was still giving ladies makeovers. For the longest time, I felt embarrassed whenever I remembered how I ran away from that nice man, and I didn't understand why I suddenly got so afraid when there was no clear reason to be afraid. Later it dawned on me that this man was on the hunt for a little girl, who appeared to be alone that he could kidnap. Standing by the back door, he could have grabbed me and been outside without anyone seeing me, given all the beeps, whistles, bells, and noises in the arcade. No one would have heard me scream. My best guess is that there was a car waiting on the outside of that door, and I was just a couple of feet from being taken away and stuffed into a car. And there were no witnesses left at that time. I don't know what or who put the sudden fear into me, but I'm so grateful for it. I'm still alive and have little girls of my own now, and I never let them go to the arcade. Nobody needs a spider ring. I've never told anyone about this in real life, but it happened about a year ago. I was sad about guy problems and I didn't really have any friends, so I went downtown alone to walk around and explore. It was starting to get dark and I was about to leave, until I found a sign for a little arcade. There's lots of old historic buildings downtown, and it was inside this building, almost hidden up a tiny staircase. I was immediately interested, so I went inside. It was really cute, like a curio shop full of so many collectibles with a small arcade to the side of the room, with classic old school game consoles. I was greeted by a man. He was wearing sweatpants and just socks. I actually thought he was kind of cute, and I thought he was maybe 25. We didn't talk at first, I just played games, until he asked if I wanted to try playing the Oregon Trail game on his old computer. He said the computer was normally just on display, but he let me play on it. So we started talking. He introduced himself as Jesse. He said he used to be a teacher, but he quit to start his business. He said he owned the arcade, and he was the only employee. He then offered me a soda, and then he disappeared for like 2 minutes to get the soda. When he came back and brought it over, it was already opened. I didn't think anything of this until later. We continued on talking. He then asked my age, and I told him 20. He was surprised because he thought I was much younger. I asked how young exactly, and he said, "I would have guessed you were around 16 years old." What? This comment threw me off completely. It threw me off a lot. It wasn't a joke. He was being dead serious. I asked him the same question. His reply was, "To be honest, I'm 36. I was extremely shocked by this because he truly sounded and looked much younger. I didn't think he was much older than myself. He laughed and asked if it's too old for me. I said, "Yeah, kinda." The energy changed after this. I started feeling really weird, like something bad was about to happen. I had a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, and I was sweating. The computer was in the literal corner of the room, and I felt boxed in. I felt trapped. He asked why it's that bad since I'm legal. He then complimented my body and told me the things he wanted to do to me. He told me I should stop being a little baby, since I acted like I wanted him. He was no longer cute to me. He had a predatory look in his eyes. They were literally almost black. I've only ever seen that with one other person. I told him I had to go, because my family was expecting me. They weren't. I tried to just walk out of there real quick, but the door was locked. He immediately said, "I just locked the door so we could have some privacy, but I guess you have plans." I was so scared. I genuinely thought he would not allow me to leave, but for whatever reason, he unlocked the door and I ran the hell out of there. I only drank a couple sips of my soda, thank God. I realized later that he might have drugged my drink. I just don't know. I haven't told anyone this before because I felt like I was asking for it by going there alone and engaging with him at first. I looked up the name of the arcade and I found his full name online. Jesse was not his real name. There were a couple of local news articles about his arcade posted online and images of him. I found him on Facebook, and he has a wife and 2 daughters. I felt so sick to my stomach. The craziest part is, months later, I saw him on Tinder and his profile doesn't even include his age somehow, and it lists his name as Jesse. I'm glad nothing happened to me, and I think he needs to be stopped, but I don't want to get involved. I was 10 years old when this happened. My mother left me in one of those arcade shops in the mall when she went to go do some grocery shopping. After several games, I decided to play DDR, and I wanted to ask the guide, well, at least I thought he was a guide at first because he was dressed like one, to teach me how to use it. He was tall and dark with curly black hair and a beard, and he seemed to be in his late 30s, which makes him seem a lot older than the other 2 employees working in that shop. But of course, since I'm just a child, I didn't really care about such details. He looked really nice and playful at first sight anyway. He of course obliged, and he taught me a little bit and watched me closely as I danced through the game. I didn't mind it at first because I thought he was trying to make sure that I could manage the game by myself before tending to other kids. However, several songs later, he was still standing beside my game screen, watching me. I don't know how to exactly describe his stares, but they kind of made me feel so unpleasant and uncomfortable that I could no longer concentrate on the game and eventually stopped playing. Even just remembering the memory of his stares until now sends shivers down my spine. I decided to try play other games, but he also followed me in every single one. I kept doing it, playing different games in like every 5 minutes, hoping he'll get fed up and leave me alone. But he never did. What makes it even creepier is that his facial expressions from being the kind employee earlier is slowly turning to something a lot more serious and dark the longer he follows and stares at me. The realization hit me. Taking a closer look, this man is no employee, and he wasn't exactly wearing a uniform. His clothes can easily be mistaken for one. I was a really shy kid, and despite having so many other children, their parents, and other employees in the shop, I didn't muster up the courage to ask anyone for help. Since I was alone, they all seemed to think he's my guardian. I really tried hard to ignore his presence and just continued playing different games, hoping my tokens would run out. My mother would come pick me up soon, until finally, I decided not to wait for my mother anymore in the arcade shop and to just go to the grocery store to find her. I was just about to go down the stairs. The arcade shop was located on the second floor, and the grocery was on the ground floor, when I noticed that this man was still following me all the way outside the shop. He caught up to me so fast, to my surprise, and whispered something in my ear, though I couldn't hear him well because of all the noises from the arcade. Noticing my confusion and pale expression, he smiled creepily as he slowly held my right shoulder and repeated more loudly, "What's your name?" Fortunately, at that very moment, my mother came to pick me up. I looked back at the man, and all of a sudden, his expression changed back to the kind and helpful guy who guided me earlier in the game. Still scared, I watched him as he played the nice guy to my mom, who hadn't suspected a single thing. I didn't tell my mom that this guy was stalking me and scaring me either. I just really wanted to leave and get the hell out of there as fast as I could. When we were leaving, I looked back at the man once more, and I really wish I didn't. He was still staring at me. He waved, winked, and silently mouthed the words, "I'll see you soon."